Good to go? All right. Have a call to order. Welcome to everybody in the audience. Glad to see you here on this bright, sunshiny day out there. Start with adopt the agenda. Motion.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Okay, and Vaughn's the second. Do we have Rachel? Or who's doing it?
Rachel is out with, that's me.
You're Rachel?
I do them anytime.
You're Rachel and Steve today, huh?
Yes, I'm Rachel and Steve, but Steve
Okay.
will be here shortly.
Perfect. For those of you who don't know, Steve's a little late because it seems like I-4 has traffic.
Surprise, surprise.
Okay, so all in favor of adopting the agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're good to go. Okay, first item on the agenda is board assignments. Last week we had discussed board assignments. I sent out a thing right after the meeting, heard back from most of it. You thought it was good. Is there any item on the board assignments we need to discuss before we move to adopt them?
I have one question, and this is based on an email that I think I mentioned it last week, so I pulled it up from Susan, regarding the service area.
Yep.
I'm not saying, especially with everything going on, that I want to be a part of it. However, the email that I received from Susan stated that the attorney recommended the secretary of the board do the signing. And it didn't even say the president, based on that email from you. I'm indifferent either way. I just don't want to go ahead and get ourselves set up where we have 3 liaisons or what have you for service area. And the attorney recommendation was to have somebody that's not on there do the signing. So,
I think ultimately it's your decision as a board who is on there.
I mean, Brian, are you on that?
No,
service
right
area?
now it is you and Vanessa, or no, actually it is Jackson and
So my
Vanessa.
suggestion would be for either you as president to be on there or take what legal advice was. Not that I want to, and if somebody wants secretary role, go for it. But that is what that email said back in, I believe it was August.
Can you refresh?
Quite some time ago.
Can you refresh us on the email? I'm sorry.
Well, I don't remember the specific email, but we were talking about representation from the board coming to the service area meetings. And typically, the secretary would be the one who comes, as it went. And we haven't had anyone participate in the service area committee meetings in the past.
Well, that's not true. I participate in the service area committees. You're just thinking of different service areas, but Artisan Park is a service area.
Oh, Artisan Park, yes.
Island Village will be a service area.
Right.
You're thinking only in terms of Charleston, you know.
Right,
Correct.
the 13, right.
Yeah, 13 to 14.
So I'm not trying to hold desperately on to more things to do. However, I think there's a reason for me to be involved in the service areas, and I'm not an officer. Everyone else that's been appointed, we have a treasurer and we have the vice president. It's hard for me to imagine that that's not sufficient for the purposes of any legality.
Like I mentioned, I'm completely okay with it, and I'll pull up that email and share it with everybody. I just wanted to make sure everybody, it's something that I saw a legal recommendation. I wanted to make sure the board makes a decision with that in mind.
So we have right now Jackson on that and Vanessa on that. Do we want to add a third person?
Vaughn's on it.
One's on it as well.
Oh, Vaughn's on?
Because it's not on the sheet here.
Are you in the service area? I'm looking. It's not on the sheet here. That's why we're, I mean, I don't care if it's Vaughn, it can be Kevin.
I had it in my notes that way, but.
Okay.
I have Vanessa as the chair, or as the point.
I think Vanessa, yeah, on our last sheet here, we have Vanessa as the point, and we also have Jackson. Do we add a third person?
Yeah, I think we should add a third person.
There's a lot of service areas. It probably helps.
Yeah, I would agree.
Who do you want the third person to be? I don't care.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have Vaughn on here either, so, okay.
Kevin, do you want it to be you?
I'm fine as long as, like I mentioned, I just wanted to go ahead and share that one item that I reviewed.
Okay. So
if that is what's required, a legal, opinion, go for it.
It's not required, it's just, that's typically what you see.
all right, so we add
So no,
Kevin as the third
add
person?
Kevin.
Perfectly fine?
Did you want to switch him to the point person instead of me?
Should you be the point, or does that matter?
I'd rather you be the point, to be
I'm not
honest.
the point, I mean.
Vanessa.
Vanessa is.
Oh,
I'm listed as a point.
Sure, I'll go for it. I'll be the point.
You're going to be the point then? That's fine.
okay, so Kirby as the point. Okay, so any other comments?
Move to approve.
Second. Vanessa is the second.
And this is to approve it as it was listed with the change to the service area being Kevin Kirby as a point with Vanessa and Jackson being on it with them. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. Okay, what I would like to do is I'd like to put this in the board package, because I think some people look at the board package, and I think certain things would actually be good to just have in there almost as a regular item somewhere, so that people can say, okay, I know I'm supposed to be dealing with this person or that person, so that we communicate clearly. Okay. Committee process and appointments review is the next thing on the agenda. We had, for just a little bit of background here, we'd had a conversation, quite a bit of conversation last spring about the committees, how many people should be on them and that type of stuff. We have committee structures. As we went through the year, and especially as we got into the technology committee, we got into conversations about why are we restricting committee size. The thought being here that if more people want to be involved and we're trying to encourage volunteerism, why restrict it and why get into conversations about, well, this person's on it and this person's not on it and why. Along those lines, with the technology committee, where Kevin came up with, which I think we all thought was a good idea, was let everybody come to the meetings, have a, I don't call it, a chair and a treasurer and a secretary that, you know, can put more order and structure to the meeting, but then everybody participates. And I believe then what we said was, let's just have that same conversation right now, so that if you're talking about recreation, if you're talking about special events or dog park, whatever, and if people really feel led to come, they can already come to the meetings, they can be there, they can be recognized, but then we have the structure through the 3 positions. So that's really the conversation we said we wanted to have as we think about committees. So we had that, the concept of the chair, secretary, and treasurer. And then we had the concept of, do we need applications really to be in the public, or can they come to the board only? Because we've had situations where people look at them, give comments, and the question is, do we really need that, or we just need to come into the board? So with that as background, why don't we open it up? Is there any reason, and again, for the audience, the way we work workshops, if someone wants to speak, we will recognize you. You're welcome to come up and talk for your 3 minutes. So if you have a comment, we'd welcome that too. But with that as background on the board, what do people think of the proposal as we've discussed and laid out here?
I'll start. I think that Kevin's idea of the chair, secretary, and treasurer is a good one. I think it makes sense. I said last year, and I continue to believe, that one of the things we should be doing with committees is refreshing the list every year by requesting everyone to reapply to the committee that they're on. I think that over time what happens is we have people that become embedded and feel like they're obligated to keep doing this work year after year after year, and it's important work and it's time consuming, it's incredible volunteerism. But I also think that it creates some staleness, that people feel like maybe there's no room, that we've filled up every spot on a committee, there's nothing open. And while it's not necessary, I think, to have everyone resign and then come back on because we need continuity, I don't think it would be a bad idea to ask everyone who wants to be on a committee for this year to fill out a new application, and that provides an opportunity for someone that's been on a board for a while, or committee, who's now just tired or wants to do something else, to say, you know what, I'm not going to fill out a new application and come off of that committee. You know, I think we've done a good job of expanding the committee reach, the number of people. These committees are pretty well staffed all the way through. But I think that in a community our size, we could have greater participation. And we ought to try and encourage that if we can.
And management has requested of all the committees to reapply with the new form and their resumes.
And how's that coming?
How's it coming? Pretty good?
So the committees are all reapplying right now.
The committees are all reapplying. I think this Friday is the deadline. So, I mean, as you'll see, we've got another technology committee applicant that turned in theirs on April 30.
Well, how would we
30th.
see that? I think that's part of my question. I had no idea that you were actually doing what we were talking about. I've seen nothing, but maybe that's just me. Have I missed something?
You haven't seen them because they haven't been in a board packet yet.
How about, instead of a board packet, how about just an update or a narrative that says, or a spreadsheet that says, here's the committees and here's the number of people or spaces? I would just like to have some broad sense. I don't know that I need great detail at this point. I'd
Right,
just like
we
to know
can
what's
do that,
happening.
and Steve can put it in his weekly report that he sends.
Weekly report that he sends.
I will gladly send to you.
Okay.
Who's rolling applications? I mean,
No.
as they come in, they are not. So only when a vacancy comes up, you announce?
Oh,
Well,
well,
what happens if somebody applies and the committee's full? What do we do with that application?
we keep it in the file.
But I think,
But I think-
okay, so we got reapplying, which I think addresses your point, and I think that makes sense. Are we going, is there any reason to constrict committee sizes? Now, we've got covenants and ARC, which we said were outside of this because they're more specialized, so we're really talking about non-ARC, non-covenants, I believe. Is there any reason to restrict the sizes?
I'd like to see the committee meetings similar to a format of a CROA workshop, where the door could be open to anybody that wants to come in. You can have the conversation, if you will, between somebody that might be interested in just one topic of, let's say, the dog park, or the everyday, operations of it. And the purpose, or my reasoning for coming up with that chair, treasurer, and secretary is to go ahead and have that order, keep the voting members, if you will, but allow the entire community to participate in every committee that we have. I mean, I see what you're saying, when it comes to reconsider, reapply, perhaps we follow the CROA model entirely, and you have a term limit on how many years you can be the chair. That might be, if that's what you're looking at, to prevent any staleness, if you will. I don't think we have any, but as a principle, it might be a good way to go ahead and operate similar to a workshop, as a CROA workshop. Apply that principle to committees.
In some of the past committees that we had, the Education Task Force, the Recreation Committee, we had voting members, and then we had people participating. That was something I think was very productive because it kept it fresh. Term limits and things like that, yeah, we can discuss it, but I don't know that, I think as long as we keep the voting members and keep the communication open for everybody, I think that kind of negates any potential staleness with regards to the voting members. Because as people come in, they will then perhaps become more engaged and actually want to be one of the voting members.
Yeah, I agree with the voting members piece, that whatever the size of the committee is, 5, 7, 9, whatever it is, that there be you have the permanent members that have been approved by the board. And then I don't know if we have a standard for committees that says about participation, meaning if you're a voting member and you don't come to 3 meetings, 4 meetings, I mean, at what point is your voting membership challenged? I don't know what our state,
There's nothing in the current resolutions about that.
Yeah, to me, there would need to be some sort of standard about participation.
Good morning, Gary Hudspeth, 1471 Resolute Street. I listened to all your concerns, but I'll bring up another one. To limit the voting members to 3 could be a problem if one member is absent, then you have 2 voting members and you have no majority vote for that month, for that meeting. And that could happen a lot.
Why would one limit it to 3?
That's still open to interpretation right now.
That's the
The
conversation.
officers would be the only,
No, I think that's what Gary's assuming.
Yeah.
I don't
Oh, I
think
don't
that's what
assume
we're
that.
I
suggesting.
You can have additional up to 7 members, but that's,
Just depends on how you wrote the resolution.
I think, Gary, I think what you're right.
Your concern is I think everybody's
The idea is that we would
concern.
identify up to 7 voting members, but the only 3 that would be specifically noted would be the president, secretary, and treasurer. That we would assign a spot to those 3 and then appoint in 4 other members.
equal vote, everyone has equal
Right.
votes.
Is that,
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that because I want to make sure what
Yeah.
we were discussing about. I've heard all kinds of conversations about
Yeah, and
which way
this
it's
is
going to go.
a brainstorm moment, that's what this is right
Yeah.
now. This conversation is actually, in my opinion, a little premature right now, because of the delay that I received for forming the technology committee. So we've only had an organizational meeting so far.
Well-
So in principle, we're trying something there, and we're gonna learn these things to
So,
get ready for other committees.
to finish my
Yes.
input, I would recommend more than 3 voting members for a majority rule to get things done so you don't have to delay it a month to get a vote. But the other reason you want more voting members, which, whatever number that may be, but, you know, the charter has a number for the 2 principal committees, is community participation. Now, I realize that if you open it up to everybody, sure, there are people now who come to the meetings, but at some point, if you limit the number of voting members, people that are participating will get tired of not hearing their voice being heard. If there's more people voting, you'll have more opportunity for their voice to be heard. And it could have the opposite effect, where people quit coming to meetings and providing input because nothing goes their way.
I have one question on this, is when you have applicants to the different committees, are we going to solicit the recommendations of the current sitting committee members, or is it going to be strictly a board decision on their own based on the application?
Repeat the question again? I'm not sure I understand.
When there's an opening on a committee,
Right?
are we going to solicit the input from the current committee members as to who they would like to see come to the committee, or are we going to make this strictly a board decision? only
That's how
based
the
on the
process is
application?
now. The
Pardon?
process is now where the chair recommends. Has it
Well,
not
we've
been?
asked in the past, I mean, but is that something we want to keep?
Well, we've
doesn't matter
asked,
either way to
we've
me.
not always followed the recommendation, at least in the last year, we didn't always follow the recommendation.
Right.
I don't think there's any harm in continuing to ask for that. I don't think we have to be bound by it.
So as a matter of procedure, then we will always ask,
Ask, that's right.
okay.
Okay, so,
Ask.
to go to Kevin's comment for just 1 second, kind of the reason we're doing this is I've had a couple of people in the audience even say, who's on my committee next year? This always gets decided in April. We need to know what's going to happen going forward so we can get ready to roll.
So that's kind of why it became this session today. I hadn't thought through the point, I didn't think it would be 3 voting members. I thought it would have to be more than 3. I hadn't thought through whether it should be everybody in the room or 7 or only, and I can see Gary brings up an interesting point. If 20 people come and you still only have 7 that vote, do you still run into the same politics? Okay, who got picked for the 7 and why can't my vote count? And there are pros and cons to both sides of that.
It's just like a mini
Yeah.
board, though, like here. I mean,
If 20
it's got
people
our
show up for
same.
one issue, it doesn't make sense for them to be the voting ones.
Right, right.
The standing committee, who has been working together and has seen a lot of the background work, seems to me to be the voting ones, the
Rather
permanent
than-
folks.
rather
All
than
7,
going
all
specific.
9, all 6, whatever it is. Not 3. 3 are just chairpersons.
Rather than having somebody just coming in for a specific agenda item.
Exactly, because then you're going to flood a room, you'll have 50 people showing up for one agenda item. So no,
Yeah.
I don't think that's appropriate at all.
I'd agree.
Doreen Moyer, committee member.
Committee member.
There's interesting ideas that have been brought up. And I have to say that each committee is a little bit different, so it has a different dynamic as to what is really needed, whether it should be changed up every year, or once you get a group together that works well, there's a learning curve to it. There's a lot of history that's involved, for example, Parks and Rec. And then when you have special events, yeah, you may want new people, but the people that are volunteering, I think, should really get first right of refusal on these committees before we add new. But, and I think Kevin and we had a good conversation about the idea of, I wouldn't change the resolution of 7 people for the committees, those that apply to that. Because I do think, because you have the spring breaks and you have holidays, and you need to have, 3 people who don't show, you can still vote on things. Parks and Rec, for example, it's important that you have a quorum, because if it's a group that's starting or wants to, if they have to wait month to month to month, it really pushes things out. So I think it's important that you stay, you have that, I think that works. I do think, I like the idea of freshness, but I think that it would be, and that's what you and Kevin and I talked about, is sort of like if you were, they would be like committee members in waiting. So they could be involved on the committee, say you're invited to participate with the Special Events Committee. However, there are 7 committee members already in place. If one of those steps off, now they'll have history because they've been coming to the meeting, so they understand, then they would be possibly have the first choice to move in based on application. And then oftentimes what happens is you'll get committee members on there and they'll say, well, this isn't really what I want to do. And then you lose your committee member, and then you don't have one. And unfortunately, there aren't a lot of people that are knocking at the door that want to come to the committee. So those who are interested in being involved and even have the history of it, I think is really important, plays a very important role. But I think that it should be open to whoever wants to, and I think that oftentimes being able to have the flavor and understanding what is going on and how they meet and when we meet and is an important consideration. And I think I said everything I wanted to say.
So are you saying you would keep the structure exactly how it is today?
I
And
would.
just continue to encourage more people to come and
Yes.
participate?
I sort of like the idea of the 3, but then again, I'm not quite sure what a secretary and treasurer would necessarily
I'll
do.
touch on that, yeah.
But I did like I liked it, I liked it, in a sense I like it, because if you have 7 people, only 3 if that's the voting member, but then again, as it was said earlier, if you don't have one, so I think the structure works. I think it should be open to anybody that wants to participate, but I think that the 7 that are in place have the first opportunity of refusal, of not being on the committee. If they submit their application, they should be considered. But at the same time, I hate to let people go who say, and again, they could want to be on there for a specific reason. You could have people come and you are talking about a holiday concert, and they say, well, we want to go to that meeting because we want to suggest something. So people will come and go based on what their interests are. But I think that staying with the 7 has worked well, and I think that I would stay with that. And in theory, though, I mean, your idea is interesting, but I think that having the 7 does give us the opportunity to usually always have a quorum to vote on things.
Right. Just to go over this once again, this is a very, very broad topic right now, our discussion today. I think there's 2 separate things, which is the reapplication and the current members and continuing it. The format that I'm going for with currently 3, that's how it is something that I brought up in December when I was hopeful to get the technology committee rolling then. We would have had this, going on for a couple months, so we can go ahead and have this conversation in better detail. My big reason is with the committee that I'll be connecting with, which is technology, I like to go ahead and make sure that I have a secretary to keep the minutes. No offense to management, but some things get lost in translation. When it comes to budgets and what dollars are spent, events would be a great example. It helps this board have backup, if you will, to encourage and receive the budget and what was actually spent on events from management. So that's the
Even blending the 2,
concept.
blend the 2 together. Blend the 2, so you have yours, don't change the resolution, but add those, and I think that...
That might be how we get there.
Yeah, I know, I
That
think
might be
you're
how we
right,
get
that
there.
would help, so I think that's a good idea. Anything else?
Okay, so
Thank you, Joy.
let me kind of say where I think we might be, and then you can agree or disagree. I think where we're at is we keep the structure that we have in place. We have 7 voting members on the committees, or I think a couple of them have 5. But, so, the same resolutions that we had before for the committee structures before. People are reapplying. We have a chair, and I think a chair, secretary, and a treasurer is a good thing to have for each group. And then let's give the technology committee 6 months to really get rolling, and let's revisit this topic, say September, when we can sit here and say, okay, with 6 months worth of wisdom, is what
we
worked
learned, here's
and what didn't work. Would that be a fair summary, a fair approach? Yes, no?
Do all the committee secretaries, do they all do minutes?
No.
Management typically does the minutes, but
You're in
just,
all the committee meetings? and
Not
do
the two of
minutes?
us specifically, but there is a
For example,
manager.
in recreation, Nikki is there as management's representative, and she takes the notes, or Corinne takes the notes.
But is anybody actually classified as a secretary on these committees?
I don't
That's
think
what I'm
so.
trying to go
Not
for,
in
is
that committee,
create,
no, I don't
is,
think so.
and I don't believe Dory,
We used to do it.
okay.
Committee members used to do it, and then, someone had liaisons and management, then the management started doing it so that they got it timely into the packet.
And it would be very similar to how this board operates. While I'd love to take credit for it, I don't actually take the minutes. Rachel does them all for me, and then we go ahead and we review and make sure they look good.
So I could
I'd like
see
that same
saying the
concept.
secretary is responsible for the minutes, and if management helps do the first draft, fine, but then the committee, I actually think there's value in having the committee produce its own minutes, because I find it's work, and it forces you to think about what actually happened at the meeting, which I think is actually good.
Just whatever you decide to do on your resolution, in accordance with what Brian said, if you would please, if your intent is, and I believe it was, exempt ARC and covenants because they're defined by the charter and the bylaws. And the reason I say this is specifically write that in your resolution, because 3 boards from now, they'll interpret it the wrong way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me make the resolution, and then you all see if you agree with what I say or not. The resolution excludes ARC and covenants. The resolution is that we continue with the committee structure on a basis consistent with how it was last year. Members will be asked to reapply. We will have up to either 5 or 7 voting members as the resolution laid out. The technology committee will work on a different structure and with the technology committee will work on a different structure. We will ask each committee to have a chair, secretary, and treasurer. The secretary for the committees will be responsible for their minutes, and then we will review all this freshly in September with the real eye being towards Kevin giving a report on wisdom learned with the technology committee.
One little caveat to that is I would say secretary in conjunction with management.
Yeah, okay, I'm fine with that, yeah.
Because a lot of your people that are on the committee are not going to want to sit there and take detailed minutes. I'm just saying.
No,
I'm trying to be realistic
No,
about it, too.
I understand, and that's kind of, I agree with that.
Well, I think the other addition to that, while the chair, secretary, treasurer is good for these committees, committees do not trump the board. And I know that probably sounds like an obvious thing to say, but it is a delegated responsibility committees that are making recommendations and advising the board. Ultimately, the decision's made at the board level.
Okay, then we'll add that part, committees.
Well, and I guess
No, I think
the
that's an
important
important
parts of that
insight.
too is that the resolution is the assignment that you've given to the committee. So it's the objectives and the goals of that committee. And you all as a board want them to stay focused on those goals and objectives.
Fine.
In what form are we going to receive recommendations from the committee, the standing committee president or whoever? Is it going to be in a workshop format? Is it going to be just by email? I mean, let's say you have 10 applicants for a spot in the committee. Do we want them coming up in open forum and explain why they want one person and not the others? How are we going to do that?
we've typically in the past, we, management, have asked the committee chair, who's reported back to us, and we report that to you.
How?
That the committee chair agrees with the appointment of blah, blah, blah.
Typically in the motion on the agenda.
There was, I don't remember who had actually sent this. There was a conversation about something about keeping the applications anonymous, or keeping
Tell you what,
restricted
let's-
to just the
tell you what,
board.
Let's vote on the motion that I made, and then let's go to how we bring people forward for the committee, 'cause I think they're 2 different things.
Good.
You can vote
Couple
second on that motion, right?
Second, yeah, I said second.
Brian,
Yeah,
that's
with
the
the-
second.
yeah, I
Some
said with the
clarifications on your motion.
Okay.
This is just clarifications. Do we need, as part of a motion for membership of a committee, regular participation? Do we need to vote? For the committee to vote, do we need to specify quorum?
I don't think it has to be specified in your resolution, but I don't think it's a bad idea to specify a certain number of misses before you replace in your resolution. I think forum's just understood. It's,
Or those are operational procedures that may not be tied into your resolution?
I would prefer it be an operational
Okay, let's keep that.
procedure.
And then just to be very clear, when you're talking about the resolution, currently we have these committees with 2018-19 goals. So we're not talking about revamping those goals at this point.
We're not, no, I think the
Okay.
the goals
We're just
get
talking about
revamped by the
organization
committees
structure.
as part of their normal process.
So you're not looking in April for us to bring you back all the resolutions again. We're talking about staying standard until September.
Okay.
To see how the other process works. Am I
Okay,
correct?
so my comments are separate from the
Yeah, well,
resolution.
the only thing we're going to be looking to come back to is we've got to say these are the committee members, so. I mean, you got
So you
people
will be able to
reapplying,
approve
so
that.
at the end of the day, you're going to say these are the, I think we have to say we agree these are the 7 people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of our job. Because we've got people reapplying right now.
But we're not gonna reaffirm the committee charters as they,
Not in your
resolutions as they
resolution.
stand.
Not in the
Okay.
resolution. Any other comments?
Call the question?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. It passes unanimously. Okay, then let's go to committee applications, which is where Vaughn and Vanessa were heading before. The question has come, do we make committee applications public, or do we keep them more confidential so we don't end up with delicate conversations happening in public?
And I'll comment on this a little bit further. I was a little upset and taken back by our community based on one member who applied to the technology committee. And a very intelligent person went through all the applications received in a board packet, then went ahead and sent out a very pointed email to everybody that applied to that committee before the committee ever even was established, had committee members. And it was an attempt to hijack and share his viewpoint and opinion on the community and what the community should be doing and should not be doing. And my response was, I appreciate your feedback. Let's have it at our first meeting. Let's have that conversation. That's the point of having a meeting, is everybody around the table. Susan and I had some emails, and we've come to the conclusion that the way he received all of the member applications, or the applications that were there, as well as their email addresses, was by digging through previous public records. I just, for that reason, I was a little uncomfortable that their contact information
I'm
was
actually
public.
in your camp. I've never been comfortable with this process of we have 9 people applying for 7 positions, and we didn't pick you 2 because we don't like redheads this month. I mean, I'm being silly, but I mean, I've always felt like this would be better handled in private.
Would agree.
I mean, you could do a paper vote and select your committee members that way if you don't want to have open discussion about who and why you're picking who you are.
But if you put in a board package, here are all the people with their applications, it's public information,
That's
and
easy.
we've learned that lesson.
And
We
it's
can
their-
pull those, that's.
I think
It's their
they're-
resumes, it's their, I mean, that is no place.
But I do
public for this.
think that we need to have a forum, at least via email, for the board members to share thoughts and, thoughts about different applications.
can't vote.
We can't vote by
Right.
the email, but I would really enjoy it if the applications only went to the board members, management obviously, and maybe the committee chair, and then we could have a discussion, and then we could say, here are 7 people brought forward for a formal vote, but we'll have had that discussion in private.
I agree.
Other people's thoughts? Agree, disagree?
And this is about vacancies. This is not about the
Oh, this will be
reappointment.
about the
This is
full
about the-
board once a
we're
year.
starting, yeah, we're starting a new process.
So, to Dory's point, current board, current committee members might be voted off. Current committee members who want to return might be voted off.
I think Dory's point was that we should
Dory,
give them
go ahead.
consideration
Was right of
first,
first refusal.
but I think that's the possibility. If they're not doing their job, I mean, if they're on the committee and they're not doing their work,
I was just going to make
Then I
one
wouldn't
quick
think-
thing.
Give me,
Okay.
give me 1 minute before you go. I think it's impossible, I think once a year, we need to say,
Jackson said they should reapply, and we actually passed that. So if they reapply, we got to reinstate them. The answer is, once you get on board for once, you don't have a lifetime membership. So I mean, I think we do need to revisit it, because they may want to drop of their own accord, or we could have 9 very qualified people, and we could have 2 people who say, I just have to be more active. I mean, I don't know, that would be the email conversation. I don't think it's our intent to throw people off per se, but once a year, we got to reaffirm who's on the committee.
Reaffirm.
No, the only thing I was going to say was, in the past, we always, the board would select the chair and then the committee members, but last year, the board selected the committee members and the committee selected the chair.
I think it's better with the committee
It
selecting
has
the
changed,
chair.
it has changed just about every year since I've been here over the past 5 years. I think what we really need to keep in mind as you all are making this decision this year is that next year there's 4 board seats up. The year after that, there's 3 board seats up. This is a overall big picture of volunteerism and governance by volunteerism, and you all are sitting at the highest level of that. So a lot of times your committee members come in and they do that to get their feet wet, and then they run for the CROA board. Or you'll have people that ran for the board, didn't get it, and they'll go into committee. So whatever decisions we make, they have to be towards sustainability for volunteers to get to this highest level.
I think it's as simple as we're saying, whether it is at the beginning of the year when we have to reaffirm the new board, or during the year when an opening comes up and 3 people want it, we want the board we want the applications for the committees with any resumes or anything to come to the board only, along with the committee, the existing committee chair and management, so that it's not public and we can have a private conversation. That's what
And I think towards that point, I just want to go back again so that there's enough direction here, at least in terms of what I'm thinking, to see if the board agrees. I would like a single email from management that says, for the committee of X, here are the following 8 names and resumes. This is everyone that's applied. This is everyone that we've got. These people are incumbents. These people are new. Please make your decision from this. I think that part of the challenge that I face is that it feels sometimes piecemeal. I don't think that's deliberate. I just think that's kind of what's happened. It kind of comes in pieces, and you don't really get the whole picture of, here's a full committee, what are we looking at for that committee? I know you had the experience with technology of having it, and then more applications came in and more. I think at some point you have to say, that's it, we've closed out that set of applicants for this committee. Here's what you are choosing from. Here are the people that you're choosing from. Maybe it's just enough to fill the committee, maybe it's not, maybe it's too many. But I would like to have just one single document from management that tells us that, so that then we can communicate via email in a more intelligent fashion.
Any other comment?
I just have a quick question. Dory, you've been a member of several different committees, both chair and members. Is there a process that has seemed, do you have any specific concerns with regards to the process that we're talking about? Because you're actually involved in it. And I know Gary and also Steve.
Well, I think that once, I'll use the Parks and Rec.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay.
yeah, sorry, Dory.
I'll use the Parks and Rec Committee as one. So we, within the resolution, we follow what is given to us, and we try to go step by step on what seems to be the most important or relevant based on time frames. But the people that are on there, that after a while, like for example, we're working on rules and regulations. We're moving forward regardless. Some people, I don't know if they're going to continue or not, but I mean, I spent 6 hours getting 20 communities, rules and regulations. You put it down, you put it on paper, we review it. We have a good group that understands, and it takes a while to get to that point. If every year we flip it up and give everybody fresh, opportunity, you have to start all over again, basically trying to get people in the swing and in the flow of what is going on. There is continuity in those people that return because they have a passion. Some have an interest, some have history, some are involved in soccer, some are involved in football. Getting those people into the group, so then when we go to meet month after month, when we start right back up again, we start right back in. There's no hiccups, no bumps in the road. It just flows. So if we Go ahead, but getting fresh idea, if people are fresh in there, I don't think that's a bad idea. That's what I said, if the committee, if you could have a 7 members that are voting members, but yet you could have a committee that's made up of 10, that's not a bad idea, and that's what I'm saying. Everyone who's interested that wants to be involved, but you still have to have X voting members so that you can move things down the road.
I absolutely agree. I think, to my point about asking for a single email, I think one of the reasons for that is that we now have committee liaisons from this board who are actively attending and participating. When the list comes out for the Recreation Committee, I've been at almost every Recreation Committee meeting for the last year. It would be my intention to say to the rest of the board in the email package, this committee is operating really, really well. I would echo everything you just said, Dory, and that we should not make any radical changes. On the other hand, if a former NBA superstar who lives in town wants to be on the Recreation Committee, we ought to talk about that, right? And so I think there's a point at which the liaison can add to the understanding of the committee and keep the committee moving forward. The problem is we get a name at a spot at a moment, and then we're trying to figure out how that fits into the bigger picture. And at least for me, that's very disconcerting and very difficult to make a good judgment about.
I think what you see, Jackson, under the scenario you're talking about is the majority of what you're going to get back is the folks that are already on the committee. Because like Vanessa said, we're not overwhelmed with applications. And we did, throughout the last year, we made it to where that every Friday Flash, we're asking for you to volunteer for a committee.
Okay. So we've already passed a resolution that says we're keeping the same structure and we're going to evaluate again in September. I'll ask whether we think we need a resolution or not, but right now we're saying we agree that this committee membership would come to the board. That would be the one time at the beginning of the year or any new member that might be needed during the year due to an absence or an opening. And it'll be board members, including the liaison, the committee chair, and management who's copied on that, so that we're keeping this stuff private and we can have the conversation Jackson just alluded to. Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
And then at the meeting, you can just vote on who you want.
At the meeting, it's an affirmation
Right.
process, essentially. Do we
Yeah.
need to put that in a resolution, or do we just nod our heads yes?
Not our heads yet.
Okay.
I'm good with
Yeah,
just
perfect.
nodding.
We got it.
We're good.
Okay, so David, I had left one thing off, but David in the Saturday email had said he wanted to talk about how we acknowledge volunteerism. Actually, I sent an email this morning where Gloria had sent me an email, and a few of you had responded to talk and thought it might be a good idea. Maybe we wrap them up together or something. So I wanted to acknowledge you had sent the email.
Yeah, and I think go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up while that subject came up. We did talk about doing something this month. I think that was an agreement that we had last month, and I don't see it happening. So I just wanted to share that with you as president and share that with management. And
Well, we did volunteer recognition at the annual meeting.
yes, but we had a conversation of what we would like to see this month, and it fell short. So the previous board, previous board is aware of all this.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with the statement. And I think we either need to follow through on Gloria's thing, or we need to follow through on what we had discussed a month ago, but we need to probably get that done in a May timeframe at the latest.
As somebody new, I'm not sure what the previous arrangement
give us a
was, so,
synopsis.
yes.
So overall, at the annual meeting, management provides an award for an outgoing, for a special individual. Jack received it, rightfully so. So that is not the question or comment here. But there was communication prior to that, leading up to it, and the fact that it was a CCMC award given by CCMC on behalf of CROA. Now,
I'm going to back up. I guess, what is it you're looking, what was the,
So
what
the
was it specifically you were
conversation-
looking for?
the conversation from this board was that we were uncomfortable with something being awarded on behalf of CROA without any CROA conversation or discussion. Not that we're agreeing or disagreeing, just the fact, don't go ahead and do something on our behalf without having the conversation with us. So, let me connect the dots.
Yeah, okay.
So the conversation was, I think all volunteers in the community are important, and there's a National Volunteer Week this month in April. And the conversation that Steve had with me, he called me up as well as 3 other board members to go ahead and get direction to move forward this way. And my input was, I'd like to recognize every volunteer And Steve's comment was that they would go ahead and work on getting either a breakfast or some type of an event in April together as a recognition. So I'm just sharing that that was a conversation that we had as part of that agreement that hasn't happened or had any discussion this month. So I can, you know.
No, it's about,
I guess I'm missing, I understand what you're saying, but I guess I'm trying to connect the dots. So what is the difference between what you were asking for and what Gloria was doing? I should have clarified specifically what.
Because the conversation,
I don't-
volunteerism
okay.
as a whole, was brought up last month, and how our team, our community, CROA side, would make that happen.
Okay.
We rely on the foundation and other partners throughout town often, but when it comes down to it, what is CROA doing specifically? And we had this conversation, we had a plan, and it didn't happen.
Okay. How were you thinking that it was going to?
Let me try.
Okay.
I don't
Thank
think
you,
they're
David.
connected.
Okay.
I had to go back to Gloria's email because it didn't match.
And Brian is
Gloria's
aware of this
email
conversation.
was about something for new members of the community. It was like a newcomer's welcome.
Right.
So I think that's a great idea worthy of discussion. What Kevin was talking about was when we were in January and February and looking towards the annual meeting, the larger discussion, which we don't have to have here, but I think it's a workshop, how do we reward, how do we nurture, how do we sustain, how do we not burn out volunteers? So these 6 committees is one thing, but there's other volunteers who will come and go. Who will sign on for something with the committee or not with the committee. But how do we think about volunteerism in this community at the large level?
And we had
That's the broad question.
and we had also spoke about maybe having a breakfast.
We
where
did
the
talk
board
about-
actually cooks for the volunteers, poisons them, and.
We did talk about.
But, I'm joking, but we had talked about a breakfast, so it.
And tying that into a particular week in this month when it's National
No,
Volunteer.
it'll make the list. It should have been there. I agree. Okay.
So that's I hope a future workshop where we can have an engaged discussion about what makes sense.
I guess, is it beyond the realm of possibility to do a hot dog cookout sometime at the end, before the end of the month? And I don't know what.
Vanessa, it's most certainly not beyond the realm of possibility to do a breakfast or a hot dog.
Yeah.
The problem is that, I don't remember it the same way.
Debbie's
That was
okay.
clear one voice direction.
Okay,
So maybe
Debbie,
what we need
got it.
management to do.
Debbie is obviously.
All right, one person, then we're going to wrap this one up.
Don't be shy.
Debbie Jackson, 413 Sycamore Street. I do serve on the committee. Volunteers, people volunteered my whole life. Volunteers don't want a breakfast. We don't want a hot dog. We don't want anything. Just say thank you once in a while, but that's it. We don't volunteer.
To get awards?
We don't get money or anything. We don't volunteer to get a hot dog. So please, that is the least that I will speak for volunteers. That is not why we volunteer for this town. We volunteer to share our knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I agree with that entirely, and this is what goes back to our other conversation, is one individual was getting recognized, and I felt that was a slap in the face to the rest of the volunteers. So by one specific volunteer being recognized, that showed me that every other volunteer wasn't worthy of recognition.
I have
So it
volunteers
was
over
one
there that
or
are
the
shaking
other.
their heads no, though. It is.
And this was a
It's a large
anybody else
discussion.
wants to jump into it, go for it, but I know that 4 or
Let's have
5 of the.
Well, no,
Have this conversation.
okay, to draw this to a close, we're going to have to workshop it. The conversation really did happen. I really have the emails. You were there. Several of us are there.
It did happen.
I think we need to go forward with that conversation.
Yes. Thank you.
I actually appreciate the comment. That takes, if it's not a hot dog and a breakfast, that makes it easier. I saw a lot of heads nodding. Okay.
But as part of that, I think engaging committees and engaging committee chairs, committee members, people who are no longer with committees, why are you involved? And I know it's not the hot dog or the cupcakes, or maybe cupcakes, but what would be helpful? What are the obstacles? What are the challenges? What are the frustrations? And let's try to make it better.
Well, I'll tell you a real story. We were at the, well, we were with you, at the, you know, at the concert at Lakeside Park. And I had a conversation with Celia McFadden, and I thanked her. And she said, "Why are you thanking me?" And I said, "Well, you give me grief, but you also have said thank you to the board 3 times. And she kind of laughed, and I said, "You don't mind grief, you really love to hear thank you every once in a while." And it fits in with what you said very well. Okay, this item is closed. We will add it to the workshop list for the future, because I think it gets around the other topic.
I'm going to
Okay.
forward you an email with a lot of this conversation.
Resolution for board approval. Kevin, you had your resolution here. You want to lead the conversation on this quickly?
I'd like to appoint the 3 members that I have listed to go ahead and be to the technology committee. We had our first organizational meeting, and it was essentially, Stephen was there, and Stephen would be our chair. Went around the room with all of our applicants. Everyone expressed their background, if they had interest in serving on this committee and what position they would be interested in, and it naturally worked its way out. So it naturally, within the group that was there, had a chair, a secretary, and a treasurer. And as long as it's approved, we would have our first official meeting this Thursday.
Perfect. Second?
Second.
Any other conversation?
Just I would like to make one quick comment, and it was addressed in our emails, but I do think it's important to address it publicly too. In the past, we have never had a chair 2 different committees. Dory, I know you're a member of lots of different committees, but you chair just one. I was not at the technology committee, so I have no idea what the dynamics were or anything like that. I just think it's something that needs to be at least acknowledged, as that we have not had this 2 committee chairs for 2 different committees. And I think that needs to be something just as a discussion for the board.
Yeah, if the process was addressed by this point, then I would be all for that. Everybody that was in that room was aware that this chair is also a chair on another committee, as that came up. So I agree with you entirely, but I can't make that rule apply just on the conversation that we've had until we have that rule in effect.
And I also want to clarify that I am not being critical of the individual at all. It was strictly a recognition that it is not something that has been done in the past, and if that's something that we want to move forward with. But I agree with, it's already out there, and, go ahead.
There's no rule or law prohibiting it.
No, there's not.
There isn't. I mean, I think it should be in the fated charter revisions list. It's something that we should look at. I will share that I have some concern that we're not just talking about any 2 committees. We're talking about covenants and technology. And Stephen is an extraordinarily qualified individual. I don't have any doubt about that. But it's a lot to take on. And I would like to, well, you're shaking your head no, but you're not the one doing it. I'd like to hear from Stephen. Huh?
What he's saying is, he actually looks forward to being busy. He's a type A. Your point is very valid. I understand.
I want him out of the house.
That's what he wrote on his application.
Go ahead, Jackson.
I just think that as we look at charter changes, we want to ask ourselves whether or not we want to formalize this, because it's awkward, frankly. It's awkward for us to have this conversation because it sounds like we're saying we don't want this individual in this spot. That's not the point.
The case, yeah.
The point is, covenants is a lot of work. Technology is, I think, going to be a lot of work. It's a lot to ask. And I frankly think that it would be better to have one person putting their entire attention on one of these things versus 2 of them.
Okay. And since you're on the charter team, we know it'll get
Can I make just one last thing? Covenants, and I've spent time on covenants, you really only meet, you meet once a month, and you sit there and you look at it's not a whole lot of work.
That's not what you said when you were on it.
Okay, I'm calling the vote.
So I don't think that's going to be an issue.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None? Unanimously passed. Next item, board meeting streamlining. Let me give the audience a little big picture first. board meetings can sometimes take up to 3 hours, which is too long. I've had people set in board meetings and leave before we go to the action items and come complain to me in my new role as president that, Brian, get the crap done so we can actually hear the action items talked about. I think it's a very fair request. I've heard several board members on this dais complain about board meetings take too long. So I want to talk about minutes first, because I'm not happy with the minute process at all today. And I'll give a little background there, and then I want to talk about streamlining board meetings, and we as a board certainly, because I recognize every single person out there, you're all active, you know what's going on. We welcome your feedback as we go through that. Okay, but let's start with minutes. I think I bounced an idea, I'll discuss it a little. Kevin and I have discussed it, he can bounce his idea. I'm willing to accept anything that the board is happy with, but I'm not happy that it's April and I don't have any board minutes for February, for March. I don't have CCS board minutes for the last 2 meetings. And we had a conversation last week where I think it was Kevin was referencing something that should have been in the minutes and we don't have the minutes. So I have bounced an 8-day rule. And what I bounced was, and I asked Rachel, how long does it take her to get minutes done? Because she usually takes them. She told me she gets them done in 2 business days. So if she's got them done in 2 business days, I said send them to the entire board. I respect the secretary, whoever it is, and I respect Kevin. Then give board members 3 or 4 days to read them, come back with comments. Kevin can put an envelope around it, wrap it up and stuff like that, or we can go with a different structure. I'll give Kevin a minute here too. But I'd like to be sitting around and say, we had a board meeting, today is April 1st, we ought to be sitting around, our next meeting is the 15th, for example. We ought to be able to go to a meeting on the 15th, which is a Monday, sit around on Sunday afternoon, review the prior minutes, and refresh ourselves versus saying, I don't know what the heck's been going on. So I don't know how the management structure works, and I don't care. I want Rachel to send it to the board. Management can throw in their 50 cents at the same point. The board throws in its 50 cents. I'll listen to any ideas you have or anybody else has, but we need timeliness, because now literally you almost have to go back and watch a 2 or 3 hour tape to even remember what happened, which is a waste of a lot of people's time. Kevin, please.
Prior to getting there, would it be best for Susan or Steve to go ahead and explain their process of how minutes work?
Minutes are done. I mean, they've been done since before last week's board meeting. We just want to make sure that we're following the process that the board wants on how you want to distribute it. I think we sent some to Kevin, and then we were saying, let's wait and see how the board wants them to go fully. So, I mean, after we get out of here, you'll have a flood of minutes coming to you, and then moving forward, we'll get them done in whatever format we want to do them.
I think we need 7 sets of eyes looking at those, and you may find something that I don't see, and Dave may find something Brian doesn't see, and then that way, when it comes time to approve the minutes,
May
since
I?
we're looked at, we're done.
Okay. May I also say, if you talk to any, I just want to clarify this, because our minutes are a little more robust than what you see in most corporations. Our attorney and most community associations attorneys say minutes are comprised strictly of motions, period. We want to fill it out some, but I have to caution you, as I've been cautioned in the past, that if they're too robust, then you open yourself up to potentially that being used against you in some action. So we typically try to talk about discussions generally rather than specifically.
Since we have recordings, we're already open.
Yeah.
So the point is a valid one, but I think we're already open because you can use it. So Kevin, I had asked you to take the...
So we had, Rachel sent off some minutes to me. I went ahead and I did go ahead and respond with some adjustments after sitting and watching the video, because I had nothing better to do on a Friday night, right? Went ahead and went through and found a couple things that really were missing that were pretty critical. I think this board can acknowledge that right down to CCS, and regardless of the meeting that it was, there were 2 motions, going back to your comment, that were missing from those minutes. And that was concerning to me. Those motions that were in those minutes that were drafted, were they missed on Rachel's end, or did they get removed when they passed up? because we would have never had any proof, if you will, if a resident in the audience wasn't recording that meeting, that those motions were made. So it's little things like that that are concerning to me when it comes to the minutes and making sure that they are correct. So I went ahead and I went through, same thing. I saw a similar situation with, I believe it was February 4th, there was another meeting, and I could have that date wrong. But I went through the minutes, and it was about 2 pages long. When it ended up with me, it was about 2.5 pages long. So it wasn't anything too crazy. Now, I'm not going to come to the table without a solution, and this is what I mentioned to Brian. I look at our other partners in town and the other entities, and I look at the CCDD as an example, and they go ahead and after their meeting, they hire a stenographer, they send off their recording, they go ahead and they have every comment that was made at that meeting written. And I would be in favor, for transparency, for this board to review having that completed for our meetings moving forward.
Well, I do transcripts, and they're $1 a minute to get those transcripts. That's a pretty expensive resource to have. And to the question of the CCS meetings, I'm not sure that that's really appropriate for this board. I think the question is, what are the CROA board minutes? The circumstances around those CCS meetings were at best chaotic. And I'm not sure that we want to revisit that and say that's the standard, good or bad, for what we want for CROA meetings. If there's something that is missing from a CROA board meeting that's recorded and taped officially, then that's a different issue, right? So my hope would be that between having the recordings and having robust minutes, we're able to solve the problem without an expenditure of a transcript that most of us wouldn't read anyway.
And while I agree with what you're saying, I do want to just add, whatever meeting it may be, the most recent one was a CROA meeting that the minutes weren't completely accurate. The individuals taking the minutes and the process is the same for both what happened for the CCS minutes and for other minutes. So we're talking about the process and that in concept alone. I believe the numbers I've heard.
Meeting. 3 of us.
Let's stay away from CCS.
So
Let's
it's
keep
not
it to
CROA.
CROA.
The principle of how minutes are made is my comments. And the fact that this board and the 7 of us here would need to go ahead and approve those minutes, it is an applicable conversation as an example. I would like to at least look into what the quote would be for a stenographer, reach out to CCDD to go ahead and see what it runs. I've heard it's about $150 a meeting. Yes, that is not pennies, but I think for full transparency and having everything properly documented, because I've even seen these videos go MIA and things, voices, get cut out or what have you. I would feel most comfortable as this board of 7 making the decision to have the details in black and white.
Yvonne, you were going to say something. Did you change your mind? If not, I can.
You've got, Rachel takes the minutes, you've got 2 pages of minutes, or I think you changed it to 2.5. I don't care, 2 pages is not going to cover a 2-hour video. You've got a video here that records, and I take your point that sometimes we have some technical difficulties, but then you have the minutes hopefully to back it up. But most of the time our videos work, and I think it's overkill. I don't see why we need to spend more money. If the minutes should be possibly what Tom has told Susan or Steve, that the minutes should be motions. And then if we want to go beyond that, we can. To Brian's point, we can be robust as we can in the minutes. I mean, you have a human factor there taking minutes, and nothing against Rachel. I mean, she does a great job. But everybody, you just can't, if you listen to this board and you sit over, if I was Rachel sitting over there at that table, I'd be pulling my hair out. Listen to everybody talk at one time. I can see how easily something can get missed.
Totally.
But we have it on the video. I just think if somebody really has a question, we can go to the video. 7 of us looking at the minutes, I think, is going to be sufficient to pick up anything that really, with any meat, needs to be put in the minutes. But every little word that's said, I just don't see the point. I understand the point.
I'd like to add one final comment, and then I won't discuss this any further, for me specifically. This board had, in their organizational meeting, decided how different roles would be, and has put me in secretary for this year. I will not be signing off on the minutes moving forward unless I am 100% comfortable with them. So the board can approve them as a whole. Mr. President, you can go ahead and sign them. If I am not comfortable, I am not putting my name on it. And that is my 2 cents on that.
I don't think anyone's asking you to sign something you're not comfortable with, to be
And that's
perfectly
what we're
clear.
trying to have this conversation.
So,
Hi there.
name,
Laurel
address.
Russo, 709 Bloom Street. I have a lot of thought on this only because I use the CCD minutes a lot and actually the transcript. And I do find there's a lot of nuance in conversation when we're talking about just sort of looking at really big challenges we have in town center as my area of interest, whether it's, some of the special event stuff or other matters. And so I can't, I would say, one, you're talking about time spent as a board, so when you're talking about signing off on meetings, you really would have to go back and look at every video and watch each one. So now you've lived through a 3-hour meeting, maybe a 2-hour meeting, hopefully. Now you're having to review that before you sign off on the meeting minutes. So when you talk about if it is 150, and I don't know what it is, it's a colossal amount of your time. The second piece, though, for me as a resident, when I hop on CCD's page and I look through the transcript, if I were to just look at the meeting minutes, if there, was just a summary, you could often think like, oh, that wasn't covered then, or that wasn't the point of it, that didn't come up, or what have you. But I can actually, as a resident, go in and read word by word the entire conversation. It allows me to not ask certain questions of the board, step, right to them or what have you, because I have the information right here. And then I can more succinctly move in and say, this is how you discuss this matter, here's what the documents say, I think there's a discrepancy, or here's what I would ask you to consider at the next board meeting or what have you. So I do feel like I have used the transcripts. They've been invaluable, and I think that they're a more accurate representation, but if I go in and look at just the meeting minutes, it may not feel that way to me, so just
Okay.
saying. Thank you.
May I propose 2 things? May I propose that 2 business days after a meeting, management distributes the minutes to the full board. The full board has 5 business days to respond with comments. Kevin, as secretary, so you'd respond to everybody with your comments. Kevin, as secretary, would be the final arbiter on pulling it together and getting something he's comfortable with, and sending that back to the full board saying, here's the final set of minutes that he's comfortable with.
If
So,
Kevin finds anything that's in there that shouldn't be there, or something that needs to be in
Yeah.
there, then he can let us know. We can all
Right.
look at the.
and in his role as secretary, he should do that.
Then he'd be comfortable.
So that would be my,
Can I just add one more thing? If you all do that, and it comes to after a board meeting, you have an agenda item that says adopt the minutes. You all approve the minutes. If, that's just as an example, Kevin votes no, and 6 of you vote yes, it's still a yes affirmation of the minutes.
agreed,
I'm
but
not
at least we
disagreeing
got
with
we got a process.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
No one's arguing,
Okay.
but we got a process. Then the second, so that would be the way we do minutes. The second thing is, let's actually have management look at transcript. Let's have them look at who CCD uses, and let's have them look at a couple others in the community of CCMC, and let's get a cost estimate. I mean, it could be $1,000, it could be $100, and then let's at least have an informed conversation so we know whether we're talking about spending tons of money or less money.
I transcribe thousands of hours every year in my business. I will tell you that when you watch and read a transcription, there are going to be huge number of errors, no matter how it's done or who's doing it. I honestly don't want to spend my time reading a transcript to make sure that it's accurate as to every word that I said or the way that I remember what other people said. There is a audio videotape of the meeting. If someone wants to look at that, if we've approved the minutes and then they want to go back and look at it, that's great, they can do that. But asking us to have a transcript of everything that's said is not only time-consuming and expensive, it's going to be a real challenge, because I guarantee you, you are not going to want to have transcripts out there that inaccurately present what was said.
Mr.
And
President,
that
I
can
believe this is conversation for the workshop after we would get this quote. I don't believe it's an applicable conversation right now.
I would at least get the information so we can have the conversation. Your point is valid, and we can sit here and we can say, we're having 3 meetings a month, 36 meetings, and if we think it's going to be a $30,000 expenditure, and I'm making up a number, that is one thing. If we think it's a $3,000 expenditure, it is another thing, but at least then we can say, we respected all positions and keep to an informed decision. That's what I'm asking.
So, did you make a motion?
I haven't made a motion yet. So the first motion would be, board or management is going to get draft minutes out in 2 business days to the full board. The full board then has 5 business days to respond to all other board members and management with comments. At the end of those 5 business days, which would be 7 business days in, everything will go to Kevin. Kevin, in his role as secretary, or whoever would be secretary in the future, compiles the minutes, comes back to the board with the final set of minutes. Then that will be what goes to the board meeting. Board members can come to that board meeting and say, I agree or disagree with this point. We'll have a vote, but at least then we got a process so that we've got something timely that we've read.
No second.
Any conversation on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So that one passed. Second one is, I don't know if I need a motion or not. Second is, I'm saying let's just ask management to work on getting quotes for transcription fees so we can sit around and say, is it a $2,000 item or a $200,000 item? And then we can have an intelligent conversation, because if it is $2,000 and we sit here and say for $2,000 we can address certain issues, then we can talk about valid issues that you raised, but we at least do it. And come back. I don't think we need a motion. We just ask management to go down that
This
path.
needs to be affirmed, and I think you've got 4 people.
Does everybody agree we at least go down this process to get the information?
I don't agree, but
You don't
I
agree.
recognize that.
Okay,
that I'm in the
so,
minority.
on that case, note it for the minutes. Okay, so now let's go to board streamlining. Oh, wait, just one second.
Well, we did that, we're on B now, right?
We're on B. Okay, so we're on B, C, D, E. What I'm bouncing as an idea, certainly waiting feedback from the rest of the board, is we go through, we do our pledge, our agenda, call the order, but then we have all these committee reports and we have management reports which take a lot of time. I would rather have, I'm proposing that we have an executive summary on top of each committee report, which is 4 or 5 bullets. That same committee executive summaries on top of the treasurer's report, and management would start with a 1-page executive report. The executive summary is almost like, here are 4 or 5 or 6 key bullets. Now, every one of us is capable of reading those. If we have a question, so we could either ask the committee member to come up or the treasurer and talk about their 4 or 5 bullet points and try to be crisp, or we could come up with an approach where we say, we'll ask if there's any questions or thank them for the month. But I'm thinking that streamlines what's taking an hour right now.
I got
Go ahead.
just one thing on that. I think by having, let's use Parks and Rec, for example, Dory coming up, I think it gives the opportunity for the public to get this on video, to hear what they've been doing. Otherwise, we just have bullets. How is that going to get out to the community?
I think the original thought was that these executive summaries would be put into the board pack and therefore be available to everybody that way. I think what I was trying to get at, Vaughn, was that the presentations take so long, they don't add anything specifically that we don't already know, and that for the community, having access to the executive summary would be a faster way. I mean, if we're going to use the same logic we had before of the transcripts, then it's there, it's in writing, you can go right to it and see it.
My only caveat to that is if there's something specific that the committee needs to make sure that the public is aware of, if they're looking for specific volunteers, if there's something like that, that would be my only caveat.
We're not excluding a committee chair from coming up and making a presentation, but I think, unless I'm misreading it, I think most of these committee chairs feel like this is sort of a pro forma exercise, and they're simply repeating what's already been said, and it's not necessary.
So blend them. So you have the summary in the board book, committee chair does a 30-second piece and refers to the board book.
I would agree.
And it's on page 17, our report, and I want to verbally highlight something we're really excited about that we're discussing at our meeting in July.
I agree with David's comment on that. I would hate for this to be perceived as any political motive to go ahead and cut FaceTime out from committees for, they might be running for future CROA boards, what have you. I don't want to see it, taking away FaceTime. I think it's well-deserved. And I believe that these residents that are volunteering, if they want to go ahead and have perhaps a time limit, hey, have everything bulleted, written, in writing, take a minute if you need to go ahead and share something. I mean, I will say when I sat in the audience, I appreciated having Dory or Eileen come up and the energy to discuss upcoming events. It was nice, it was a fun part of the meeting, so.
And
I don't mind hearing those.
sometimes visual props.
Oh, yeah. That was PJ.
Oh.
Yeah, those were good too.
The only other thing I would ask, and I think I did that in an email, is some sort of broad, wide-open framework, whether it's key points, action items, future discussions, just something rather than totally open-ended, something that helps
I think
frame.
Vanessa had actually talked about possibly even putting together a draft of a one-page.
Yeah, what does a one-page look like?
Right? I mean, if she could continue to lay that out, because then we could almost go to the committee members before the meeting on the 24th, say, here's what we're thinking about for a one-pager. If you want to talk, keep it 2 to 3 minutes, and is that fair?
Yep.
So Vanessa, I know had already been thinking about that.
Good.
So, and that would be the same for the treasurer's report, so we've had my 3 to 4 pages, Vaughn would have 2 or 3 bullets. We talk about an inter-county issue or something like that. And on management, kind of almost the same thing then, we call Todd up if we got questions for Todd, we call up Tony or Suzanne, whoever, if we got questions, but we streamlined the management portion too. They can read the book if there's, obviously Steve is gonna have a little FaceTime, talk about athletic fields and a couple of things, but, so we're really, in this model, we're saying, let's see if we can get that done in 45 minutes. And then we'd have an hour and 15 minutes for action items. We spill over a little, we spill over, but that's life. But at least then we get more focus on action items, which I think is the more critical issue anyway. Is this a acceptable plan? Yes, no? Do we need to vote, or everybody nodding their head yes?
Nodding head, yes.
Okay, good. Next item, we're rolling.
And that's for April,
That will start April 24th.
April board meeting.
And we've all nodded our head yes. There's people in the audience. Is everybody comfortable with this? I mean, several of you talk, so everybody's good. Okay.
Governance and technology chair.
Town center cable internet. Jackson?
You want to do a quick update?
Yeah, please.
Laurel Rousseau, again, 709 Bloom, Unit 230, Town Center Board President. I'm starting the cable process a little late to the game. I thought all of it would have been handled by Lexington, so I'm just kind of jumping in, changing our cable. Last week, we contacted Smart City. They did come to 709 Bloom Street. They did determine that they could actually change over and provide cable to us. At first, it sounded like they wouldn't be able to. One other unit owner also was successful in getting cable. However, they did find that, so I guess and I'm bad with technology, but we have fiber to the building, and maybe that was done during the promo period a couple of years ago, but all of the wiring within the building was Cat 3, so essentially we had like 100 meg service or something like that. So at any rate, slow. They said they could try to pull the cable. They did. They were successful, so that was fine. But at that same time, last Friday, I heard from somebody at 611 campus who had contacted to have 4 units changed over. They were told that building could not be addressed at all. So we already have one satellite dish on a handrail over there, a balcony rail, and I'm expecting many more. So when I contacted Smart City, happened to call me this morning and check how the installation went. So I asked them to transfer me. I wanted to talk to the Department Customer Service who could verify the 611 campus situation. And if I'm understanding it correctly, the people who have service in there currently actually are running Cat 3, so slow service. If you were mentioning that, I know Noah may speak to that. In that it has to be an HOA decision again, a directive from an HOA. There will be a cost involved, so I'm assuming fiber is not to that building, maybe because it was all residential, larger.
again, a little hard to get the information, but it sounds like we're back to square one, not unlike Comcast, where we may have some select buildings that are, they will not provide without additional cost from the HOA fiber to that building to stop us having to use satellite dishes. So that's what I understand it to be. I'm not saying that's exactly what it is, but that's what I understood from the conversation. So I'm just here preemptively asking, as a town, as somebody who's the sub-HOA, not the master of the buildings, we don't own them, et cetera, how do we preemptively address this so that we understand, okay, we're going to have 15 units that have dishes and everybody's going to accept that and CROA is not going to be all over us, or no, we have to do something and we have some effort that we can pressure somebody to help us. I don't quite know. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Laurel.
Does
Steve, you
DirecTV
wanna-
have to have,
I'm
do
sorry.
you have to have your own dish, or can you have one on the roof?
No, you have to have one for each property.
Oh, you do?
There might be some bulk things that they could do, but this goes back to, and I guess you're gonna ask me to provide some, okay, so this goes back to which HOA are we talking about has to give authority, because CROA didn't give permission for Smart City to lay their lines originally, and they didn't give permission necessarily for Comcast to lay their lines either. Those were all run through easement agreements with the development district. It sounds to me if they're saying an HOA has to give permission, it would be the Town Center Condo Association has to give permission for that. We don't own any easement rights or any property leading up to there that they would need to drop the cables through. So it is strictly a decision by the cable company or Smart City to decide to run their wires there, and then do they have access rights from the association to get into there, which would be the Town Center Condo Association. Now, there may be some CROA access rights that they need also, and I think those would be easily worked through, but if it's running a higher cap line, that sounds like it's that individual association.
So I think, but to Laurel's point, I think she's also talking about the dishes on the
Yeah.
balcony.
That's gonna be
That
my
would be
comment.
Canoa though, wouldn't it?
That's a CROA thing.
That would be Canoa.
Well, when it comes to aesthetics, where you're allowed to put
Aesthetics.
them, those types of things would be done through design guidelines. But then there's federal law that would trump that on top of it. So that takes a little bit more research to do. I would like to know a little bit more about the Smart City, though. I will have a follow-up call today or tomorrow with the CEO of Smart City, because last week on Wednesday's meeting, it was that nothing could be done at all. And then when I'm back today, it looks like they were able to make some progress. So it'd be interesting to see what, if he could give me a little bit more information on why we're where we are.
I'm sure there's a concern with the owners that having a dish on every balcony, what that's gonna look like for your
Well,
city.
sure, that, yeah,
As
from
a-
an aesthetic
Can I
standpoint.
just ask quickly why Lexington, I mean, we don't have, when you say sort of running, we've already said, we said with Comcast, we would give approval under the condo association, but we don't have access to that electrical closet, that building is not ours, so I don't think it's, I
Yeah.
don't know that it's just ours, it may be a combo packet, but we
Right.
have obviously no relationship with Lexington.
Sure.
And separately, I can't even unlock the door for Comcast or Smart City to come into my end building electrical room.
Right. So for the purpose of the camera, Laurel, who was just sitting up here, is with the Town Center Condo Association. They are a unique condo association in Celebration where they have a multi-use. So they're part of Lex in downtown. So they do have a third entity that maybe complicates this a little bit more. So let me talk to Marty today or tomorrow and see if I can get him on the phone and find out what exact reasoning, why they could do most of it but couldn't do one. 611 is a multi-use building, right?
It's a
got-
fully residential.
Oh, fully residential, okay, I've got my
But so is
bearings wrong.
Bloom, that's the only other
Right,
second.
that and Bloom Street, okay.
I guess my only question that I remember when we were dealing with Sienna and their satellite dishes, perhaps we can use whatever our resolution was with Sienna, and I don't know if that even applies.
That was more of finding locations where they could put block satellites and.
Right.
Yeah, the challenge that we're going to face is that, just to bring everybody up to speed, Comcast is not going to be a viable option, most likely, for these. So
Because?
Because Comcast isn't willing to run into individual multi-use buildings without onerous agreements, and they pretty much walked away from most of those. That's the condo issue that we've had around the community. So then the second option was run internet TV through Smart City lines. Smart City is running something called a Cat 3. That's a very old line. It's brittle and it has very slow speed, as Laurel said. Typically now you run Cat 6 cable. In order to run the Cat 6 cable, now you need to decide who's got the easements and the rights to go from the box, wherever that junction point is, into the individual buildings. That's what Steve was just talking about. Then you have some residents who will say, I don't want internet TV, I want dish TV, and they will want to put a dish out. When you're in a condo situation, south-facing, the only option for a lot of these folks will be to go onto their balcony or patio and put up a dish. And that would violate our covenants, except that there is a Federal Communications Commission's rule that says that HOAs cannot restrict those dishes if they are the only means of gaining access. So we end up getting, as you said, trumped by that particular rule. So the best alternative, aesthetically and functionally, would be to have the internet cable running at Cat 6, or Cat 5 at least, into those buildings. So I think if Steve is talking to Smart City, that's a first step to have. The reality is that come end of this month, you won't have services because Comcast will no longer be running on Smart City lines. That's what's been happening up to this point. Does that help? Shorthand, it's a mess, and it's not going to be easily resolved.
So basically, Steve has this conversation. Steve do emails with the board, copy of Laurel. And I'll give you a chance to talk in a minute. So at least we're communicating as regularly as we can about decisions. We know we've got another meeting on the 15th, and we'll see what we can resolve in the next 8 to 10 days. But I agree we should try to make it a high priority.
While management is reaching out to Smart City, given the relationship, Smart City is owned by Disney, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So given that relationship, can perhaps you, as the CROA manager as well, speak with Paige Pierce? I know it's an indirect relationship, but Paige works for Disney, Smart City's owned for Disney, we're developed by Disney. See what keeps happening. Can we go ahead and just see if he can assist, or have any conversations with somebody else about
Marty
that?
Rubin's the CEO for Smart City.
Right.
And I think he has higher authority level when it comes to Smart City operations than Paige says.
No, it's just a relationship
If I
thing.
get to a brick wall with Marty, then I can certainly reach out to Paige and see if he has any other suggestions. But I imagine he's going to send me back to Marty at this point in time. So let me try Marty first, and if we get no results, then I can go see if Paige has any suggestions.
Even just keeping him involved and aware, because these dishes will end up on what is in no man's land between CROA and CNOA for the satellite dishes. He might just need to be aware of this.
Shooting him an email.
And we've worked with
heads up.
CNOA for one of the restaurants' satellite dish placement.
So,
Okay. Anything else on Town Center Cable, Internet? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No Ideas, 611 Campus. The tenant that Laura was actually talking about, she actually had gone into some of the commercial entities as well. They also had no idea what had gone on with the Smart City not providing phone service to the area, or Comcast doing the same. But shortly after, apparently Smart City came through and actually started assisting those commercial entities once they bubbled it up to Lexa. So that might be something that we might also want to touch on.
Why don't you also talk to Mike Nunez?
We did, and Laurel actually was in a meeting with myself, Mike Nunez, and one of the representatives from Smart City, so there was a conversation at that level of how they could help.
Yeah.
but Mike wouldn't be the most appropriate person, because Mike is hired by Lexington Realty, and Janice would be the property manager, so
Exactly.
we don't want to muddy anything any worse than it already is.
No, I mean, they're fully aware. I've had multiple back and forth conversations with Janice and Laurel on those conversations. I mean, there is a understanding of the situation on the Cat 3s and what kind of wiring's available down there. So I think the next call to get some results is to go to Marty and ask him if he can step in, and if there's any other recommendations that they may have.
Okay, thank you. We'll wait your email. Jackson, UCF Sustainability Study.
Last year, the board authorized us to move forward on what we called a sustainability study. This was a study done by the University of Central Florida to review our systems, our use of management tools and procedures, so that we would have something in place that would provide a measure of sustainability. We decided to approved that last year and to begin the process this year. Dr. David Mitchell at UCF has been our contact person, will be leading that study. He is now prepared to begin that work starting next month with an expected presentation date to this board in September. The study will be done with the cooperation of management and the board. It will require some interviews and on-site work. We will be getting more details as the formal pieces of that come together. And I think it coalesces nicely with the ongoing studies that we've talked about, that we talked about last year with CCMC. Also looking forward to the charter changes and some of the broader things that we're doing around the community. So we are moving forward on it. And
will there be, for the launch of his project, I mean, probably we ought to get Marianne and Vanessa the stuff even from last year, but from the launch, will he have a presentation or a timeline or something, or how does it work?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I'm waiting for the documents to come in for you all to sign and actually formally approve. I mean, as the board, we approve the expenditure. Now we need to, they're preparing the documents at UCF, the agreement. Once we have that, then I think that's the appropriate next step is to ask.
So is the contract with UCF or him?
The contract's with UCF.
Okay.
It actually involved, if I remember right, 2 or 3 UCF professors working together and everything.
Right. But it is with the university,
Yes.
and that's one of the reasons we're getting the work done at I think a dramatically lower price than we might have if we'd gone to a commercial company to do it. So.
Okay. Anything else on UCF?
And I will put together an update for Vanessa and Marianne and the rest of the board as well.
Okay, thank you. JR, if I can have you come up. Well, JR is coming up July 4th. One of the things we talked about at the last board meeting was, okay, who signs the contract? Reviewed the audios and everything. And we kind of ended up in we're the ones pulling the permits. Mike said, you know, he's happy to give us the money. And at the end of the day, we all agree if something goes wrong, everybody's going to get sued. So I think we agreed I could probably sign the contract. Tom Slayton, I understand, is reviewing the contract. Susan had looked at it and said it's the exact same one that was signed in 2016, but we wait for him to come back.
He has come back with no...
With no changes?
Nothing. No changes necessary.
Okay, so we're saying that contract would be good to go. Other issues around July 4th. I know you've done the entertainment thing. What are we going to do to start telling people in the community there's going to be a July 4th and we have entertainment and stuff like that, so that people even know about it and stuff like that, and safety and all that other wonderful junk? Can you just give us an update, Joe?
Sure. My goal is the May issue of the Celebration News to basically have a story in there about the 4th of July, everything from the parade to the fireworks to concert, kind of explaining everything. The June issue will include I'll call it a safety flash. It'll also be available on our website in the Friday flash as well. It's similar to what we put out in 2016, but it touches on the hours of the event, road closures, traffic patterns, basically anything that would affect residents.
Okay. We ended up, the last conversation, it was Lexington was going to be up to 30, and we were up to 35. That was with entertainment at 12, 12.5, something like that. We ended up getting entertainment for $62.50. So we've got that down to slightly under 30. We also, in that meeting, if I remember right, said we would have a question regarding whether we need to park and ride using the school or not. We need to make that decision. It needs to be a yes or no decision that we talk about. Are there any other decisions we need to make, or is it pretty much a go?
Just the park and ride is one of those best practice recommendations from that group that we put together with the sheriff's department and the county. And the more we can get people away from downtown and get them to park in an off-site location and bus them in, the less traffic we're going to have.
Just as clarification too, the school had the parking facility there, because I was actually on the committee that did it for the school. It's the band fundraiser.
Right.
We still had the park and ride, even with the fundraiser. Just to clarify, we had both, so it wasn't a one or the other.
And we did in July, or in 2016 also, and that was not advertised at all outside of the community.
Right.
What was not advertised, the parking lot?
The entire event.
The event.
We didn't do any radio
Yeah, and the
stuff.
event is not going to be outside the community advertised too. So I think the question was, if I remember right, the parking right cost $1,800. I'm going from memory here. And the question that was specifically asked, I think by Kevin, I think it's a good question, was, if it's not outside the community, will it get used or is it a waste of $1,800? And that is, it's a fair business question.
What happened, how much was it used before?
We estimate we had about 500 cars that used the parking lot.
This parking lot or the park and ride?
The park and ride parking lot. As far as the band, I've reached out to the band director already, but, I mean, when it's 16, they were at capacity over here to the point where they're actually trying to park some on the fields.
Yeah.
So
they
that's
were full.
They're always
Yeah.
full.
So basically, we're gonna need parking capacity is what you think.
It's either that or they're all gonna be, the problem is they get downtown, and if they're not residents, they don't know where to go, and then they just go around in circles and clog up downtown, so we wanna get them away from there.
The park and ride would be advertised to residents.
There would be signage coming into Celebration. We would announce that there is a park and ride as far as any materials we put out, and there would be A-frames coming into town directing people to a park and ride. And I think, even though it's not advertised to the outside, those who are aware that there is an event here and have come in the past kind of get conditioned to the fact that that's where they need to go.
So it almost sounds, go ahead, Kevin, first.
I just wanted to comment on the park and ride. I will say, I understand the reasoning and why we may need it. I'm going to be uncomfortable if it's being paid for by CROA dollars, so I just want to go ahead and review that part. I think we did a great time, or the sheriffs did a great setup for Halloween when Steve reached out, and I appreciated that at that time, to go ahead and have traffic control on Halloween. It was nobody's event, if you will, but we recognize that traffic came into the community. I'd like to see if something like that could repeat itself once again, because it assisted with the traffic flow in the community overall.
That's part of the plan also, the traffic.
So tying on to that, my final note was just to see a traffic plan. If that's, by us here at the CROA level, I'd like to see that prior to that contract being signed or within a reasonable time frame.
The
traffic plan has been designed, that was part of the CDD application that went in. It was designed in conjunction with the Osceola County Sheriff's Office.
The reason I would support the park and ride, and I understand what you're saying about the CROA dollars, is because if you don't have that park and ride, the people that would normally use that are gonna be parking in town, and that's gonna cause congestion to the residents. And I would think
It's an
that'd be a
inconvenience.
convenience for the residents not to have to deal with all that traffic coming in and rather have buses. That was my
Well,
point.
and we were tasked with looking at traffic, parking, cleanliness, and safety. And to address traffic and parking, the buses dropping people off were a big part of that. Now, it's not advertised through the radio, it's not advertised in the newspaper, it's only going to be advertised through our mediums, but the reality, what we saw in 2016 is even without advertising, people still show up to
People have
fireworks and
friends, and they tell their
celebrations.
friends.
Absolutely.
You can't control people from not coming. Go ahead.
Can I
Laura.
just, I don't need you to.
You don't need to, yeah, you can just pull it over so that we can hear you.
So Laurel again, 709 Bloom Street. My only question was, I'm confused, can somebody clarify? I thought actually the board did approve the CCS money for the 4th of July to go over to Lexington, and that has to be used exclusively for marketing. So are we sure? You may not be advertising outside of the community, but do we have some clear indication that they took that money and are not using it for marketing? They are not.
No, they're not taking,
taking-
Lexington's not taking any grant money at all for this.
They didn't for 4th. Was it not approved? Am I remembering that incorrectly? I thought
We
you
had
folks.
said that we had said we were going to use CCS money. So,
But not grant money.
Not grant money at all.
Okay, so grant money, no 4th of July, absolutely is for no marketing.
And to make it
Yes.
clear too,
No marketing.
for any rumors that may be out there,
Thank you.
and correct me if I'm wrong on this, CROA is not paying for the fireworks. CROA money is not being used for the fireworks. So there will be fireworks from what I understand, but it's being paid strictly by Lexington. It's not CROA money.
Correct.
The last item, just for maintaining, I did find, through other things, we have an attendance that was estimated to be between 25,000 to 31,000 individuals at the 4th of July, on an affidavit that I recently received from Lexington. So, and that's from Janice Payne. And I'd like to go ahead and keep that in mind, that we did have this conversation last month with Mike, He had no idea of how many people attend. It was going to help me make my decision. I came across this afterwards, and I'd like to go ahead and just keep that in mind, that I am still in favor of this. I'm very much so. But I want to go ahead and have a plan for 31,000 people showing up in our community.
We have a plan in place, and as far as 31,000 people, I highly doubt that.
That's their affidavit, so either that's a lie on
Right,
license
well,
card,
they
or-
need to promote the downtown and their businesses, but I don't anticipate.
Yeah, court's minute, but,
Our plan is at the level of 2016, and it was sufficient, and we were planning for the maximum amount of people that would be here.
okay, and my final comment on this is, you mentioned that you'd be putting an article in the May magazine.
Correct.
I'd prefer just one of 7 for that to be pushed off till June. I think as a traffic control, a little bit better. June would be more appropriate for that to be in the magazine. May might be premature.
I'm going to make one comment on that, and I'm going to say this only because I happen to be talking to some of my friends who a lot of times go out of town for 4th of July, especially when we don't have something. They're actually adjusting their plans so they can be here for it.
Oh, yeah, we
So,
can
but-
share it different ways.
But I think my point is that if you give people advance notice, 2 months advance notice on having, for a community event, I don't think is unreasonable. So that would be my.
The
only
traffic
concern.
flash and the information would be in the June event, but the information about the event happening would be in May.
I would actually swap that, but,
Well, we would-
I just feel like that magazine is a CJC expense, and it's, every resident pays for 3.14 copies of that magazine, if you will. So, or that's the old math for the magazines. So, I just feel as though by putting it in that magazine, it is primarily geared towards promoting it to outside the community.
I would request that the board give us clear one-voice direction on this.
I'll speak, personally, I think that having it for both May and June is realistic, and I think it's probably consistent with what we have done in the past. Is that accurate, JR?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, that's my thought.
It's on the back porch. It's in our videos. I mean, the only question that people really have is who's the entertainment, and that's already leaking too, so,
Did somebody tell a spouse?
pardon?
Did somebody tell a spouse? I've been guilty of that before, by the way.
I don't know what the
I haven't
entertainment is.
said a
so
word
I don't know.
Okay, maybe. When are we gonna announce the entertainment?
Well, it was going to be the May issue, but evidently
Okay.
Brian's taking it out now. so.
I'm not gonna leak it.
So part of what you're talking about is celebrate the 4th of July, come at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, there's a nice parade, whatever the time is.
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock for the parade. If you want to get a float in, see this information. In the evening, we're going to have a good old-fashioned, I think that was some of your language before, a good old-fashioned 4th of July, maybe Steve's language.
Something along.
Just we'll have some entertainment, and we'll finish with some fireworks. I mean, that's what you're wanting to say in May.
Correct.
I would think that if we're going to.
Spend the day with us.
Overview May, logistics June.
Yeah, logistics in June.
Fair enough?
I'm
Or
okay
would
with
there
that.
be enough time for people to
make-
digest the traffic issue, all
There'll
the.
be more
that's
traffic
what's gonna be in
specific in
magazine,
June,
right?
right? June would be more about the traffic
And
routes.
those are the local logistics in June.
May would be more of the big announcement type.
Okay.
So basically, we're saying we're gonna have a park and ride too. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
In June, saying that in June.
No, just overall.
Overall.
It sounds like we're saying we need it based upon everything else
Oh, I see.
we're hearing.
Well, it was in our narrative, wasn't it? When you put together
Yeah.
the plan,
That's
we
part of
had
what
the
was
park right
approved.
there.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
there's nothing changing there, is there?
No, just who's paying for it, so the park and ride is a
CCS.
CCS expense?
The whole thing is, except.
The whole
for-
thing is a CCS expense.
The spreadsheet that came out, I think, had some CROA that I saw that time. That's-
Yeah,
I
and
just
the
want to make
last,
sure I know
no.
I'm on the right document.
It is a CCS expense. We, said at the end, when we talked about this before, we said we'd call a CCS meeting, we didn't do it. So I'll talk about CCS here in one, actually, we're done with this stuff here. So the
Do
CCS,
you need more direction though first with
you need more
regards to-
direction, or are you good now?
Sarah, I think we're good, right? Do we need more direction on this? We're gonna go as planned, right? Okay.
Okay, so to wrap up the 4th, I will be signing the contract. I had requested, in the thing I sent out this weekend, I'd like to have I'd like to have our agent just come through, walk the ball fields, and tell him we're doing the 4th, just in case he has any comments, at least then from an insurance perspective, we thought about it. And I think it's good practice. CCS expense, I'll talk about CCS in 1 minute. And we're going to go with park ride and everything the way you did it. Just keep updating us. Thank you, and we're rolling. Okay, CCS. We've got a tax attorney reviewing the 501c4 language. We got that person moving last week. In the agenda I sent out, which isn't on this agenda, I actually said we were going to talk about CCS auditor, so that seems to have dropped. So we've got, but for the tax attorney, I'm hoping to hear something in the next week or so. And for the April, I would hope on the April 15th meeting. In a perfect world, we'd have a CCS board meeting on April 24th. And I think the real requirement there is we need the tax stuff, so at least we can say, here's the tax letter, and speaking to the legality of everything. At that meeting, I think we also need to resume CCS because we're spending money, whether we're spending money on an audit, whether we're spending money on the 4th, and for legal stuff, so we need to unsuspend it from those perspectives. From an audit perspective, I'm just going to lay it all out here. We had sent it to 4 firms. One firm did not respond, chose not to respond. Another firm said they would not do it. We have Fontana and Company, which gave us a bid that with expenses will be slightly more than $10,000. And we went to Cole and Company as the 4th, and they're $4,400. From the perspective of us, when we look at we think the attorney letter is the one that really drives all the legality type issues. Susan has put together all the financial stuff. The audit is really about I think it's going to be about as streamlined and straight as it can be. In my opinion, I think the real difference between the 2 audit firm proposals is Cole and Company's got all the audit control environment, compliance, all those things that professional standards make you do in place. Yet a new firm obviously does not have that stuff in place and has to build those capabilities. It's just reality. I think the business decision that we have to make as a board is which one of the 2 audit firms do we go with that we've got proposals from. And then we'll be moving on all the fronts for the most part as regards CCS. Does the board, I had submitted all of the paperwork on the proposals to the board. Does the board have comments on the CCS auditor? I'll just ask.
I'll quickly, just for public record, because I was president of CCS, I have recused myself from any conversations at all with regards to CCS auditing, just as a full disclosure.
And the reason I'm asking these questions right now is every auditor is busy right now, so if you make an audit decision, you're going to have an audit starting in late April. If we defer that decision till April 24th, you'll have an audit being started in late May probably. So
a technical question. You talk about April 24th as a CCS board meeting. Any reason not to do?
I'm sorry.
Any reason not to do that April 15th? Adjacent to this workshop, just a question.
He'll be out of town?
No, I'll be back.
Oh, you will? Okay.
Comes back. Are you back in town?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that's just a question.
I think my only hesitancy would be is do we have the legal
The tax letter? The
tax letter back?
Okay.
To have a board meeting without the tax letter back is counterproductive, in my opinion.
So it's giving a little more of a window for that.
And if you go with the 24th, you have a workshop at 9:30 in the morning, and you have a board meeting before that or after that, you're excluding anybody who works. If you have a CCS board meeting on the 24th that happens before, the other people who are working can come to if they want to, and it was well attended last time. So that's would be my thought process on the 24th. Really, the only question I think we have is the auditor. Do we make a decision now or not? I mean,
so then a procedural question, can this CROA board make that decision, or do we have to adjourn and reconvene as a CCS board, and then do we have to publicly notice that CCS board meeting? Which means we can't make that decision today.
The first question is yes,
procedural.
You would need to reconvene as the CCS board. It does not need to be posted because it's not a homeowner association.
Okay, so we could.
And that's through legal opinion.
we could do it. The only question becomes, since the CCS board is the exact 7 people who are up here, we could, since no monies will have been expended, since all we're trying to do is get the audit on a scheduling list, and since we know it can't start until at least late April,
We can ratify later. The question is, do we want to make a decision about how to get it on a scheduling list? Because if we're not going to make a decision till the 24th, I need to tell two auditors we're not making a decision till the 24th, and then they'll wait 3 weeks.
Some of us weighed in on the email correspondence.
We're having a public conversation is what I'm doing here.
Okay.
Go ahead, David, what are your thoughts?
Do we need to end this CROA meeting and reconvene a CCS meeting? I know we're the same people.
I think you can discuss it right now, but if you want to vote it through, you're going to need to adjourn and then take 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, to discuss it, I weighed in the lower price option is appropriate because it seemed like the same credentials and we're going to get the same,
Okay, let's just cut to the chase then. Do we want to have a CCS meeting after this CROA meeting that'll last 5 to 10 minutes for the purpose of discussing the auditor?
Procedural?
Procedurally, I think it's probably.
Okay, we'll do that.
I'm just going to hit a couple of 1-minute items. Parks and Recs Facility Plan Survey. I'm just hitting some 1-minute items.
Thank you. Yeah, we got a draft link back on Thursday. I have a page and a half of notes on that one. A couple of the things we requested with the 17 items before were not done properly, and then there was some mismatch on some of the language, and so it's back in their hands as of Friday. It's frustrating.
And in a perfect world, we would hope to get that survey.
I would hope to be out this week.
I asked them before leaving last Wednesday to have it ready for today so that we could at least start communicating this week and start next week. That would have been the time frame. So
I think it's close, but there was still some logical errors. You make a choice 1 to 5, and then if you put a comment, you negate your choice. It doesn't work. We've told them that before, and
we can't send it out without the functionality.
Can't send it out until it's clean.
Well, the other thing we have to consider is we paid for a certain level of functionality. We paid for a $30,000 master plan. We didn't pay for $80,000. So at some point, if functionality that they have available that we agreed to doesn't work, we're going to have to go back to the way the questions were originally done.
I think we're
either that or pay more.
I think we can just make some wording changes, like with what I looked at yesterday, and it would work. We just got to get it done and ready now.
Yeah, I gave them some alternatives, assuming that they don't have the functionality to do what is needed.
Okay, thank you. Vaughn, any update on the county?
The county, after Steve and I had met with the county, based on some language change, which to us was questionable and probably unacceptable, we decided to, because there were legal issues involved, we decided to have our attorney, Tom Slade, for CROA, contact the county attorney's office, and they are working to resolve some issues that we have with the language, and until we hear back, we've heard back some, but we're putting them back together, and once we hear what they say, we can make a decision on what we want to do as a board on that money. That's all I really want to say right now, because the two attorneys are working on it.
Okay. On a different topic, we received an application for Larson Prime, which we had used last year. I don't know if everybody read it or not. I read it. To me, it's the same language and pretty straightforward and saved us money. Is there any reason, from a board perspective, not to proceed with Larson Prime?
No. I'm fully in support.
It looked good.
Yeah. Kevin, you go with it?
I think I'm supportive of it. I just have concern, is it best to continue with the same attorney that we always have? Do we have to acknowledge that? Do we have to acknowledge, at least say, hey, yes, we are comfortable continuing with our current attorney? Because that's what this is, right? This is our retainer.
1 year, yeah.
So I just want to make sure, is this how this board acts? Do we keep what we have and just keep renewing it? Or do we go ahead and look at the greater picture? When we renew our contracts and work with our vendors, do we just keep it going? Or do we review them?
I think the relationship with an attorney is a slightly different relationship than it might be with some other vendors. There's a value of continuity. We're involved in litigation. We're involved in a number of ongoing events. Speaking for myself only, I think that Larson Associates has done a superb job, and I would be I think it would be a waste of our time and energy to go out looking for another attorney to replace them. There's no point at which I feel like they've not done their work professionally and competently.
I'd like to just make sure everybody on the board says that.
Yeah.
I do.
Did we not a year ago or 2 years ago go through a process of looking at attorney? So
It
it
was
was done
2017.
recently. Was it 2 years ago?
17, yeah.
17.
And
Yeah,
then-
and so I would also echo Jackson's point. We engaged them a lot this year.
Yes.
And I feel very good with the turnaround time and the quality of service in that relationship.
And the continuity with regards to legal issues, I think that's important right now.
Okay, so does everybody agree? I have no problem with what was just said. So we agree then Larson Prime makes sense to renew?
Yes.
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 Okay,
So Brian motion, Vaughn second.
yes. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay?
Okay. Settlement draft from our conversation at last week's thing, we had a separate conversation. I've heard from 4 or 5 people. I read it. Everybody
Yes.
good with it?
Good.
Anybody have a problem?
Good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Good, we'll take care of that one.
Did you all get that?
What is it?
The
settlement draft,
Look at
we're
the
good
notes.
with
Look at the tape.
So that, you know.
I will. I always watch it
Read the
twice, it's
transcript.
not enough to do it once.
Okay. What I will be forwarding to the board is Weathermatic, is the one we had talked about, who was the weather service type stuff, has come up with a proposal. It's a 3-year contract, and it's about $3,000 a month, so it's not immaterial change. I think the board will need to discuss it probably at a workshop, and I think it's probably one, Kevin, that might be something to think about at the technology committee. There's been conversation going for a year, so if the technology committee could do it sooner rather than later, that would be wonderful. But, before we commit to spending $108,000, now you get a lot of long-term savings over 10 years and stuff like that, but it's not immaterial, so the board needs to be aware of it, and I will forward some of that stuff. I don't actually have the PowerPoint presentation. I had an Excel thing, so if you'd send me that.
I can send it to you.
All right, anything else?
Just one quick
Go
thing,
ahead.
this dovetails two of our discussions. Several of us are members of the Celebrators, and they meet this Wednesday. I asked the chair there if I can make a quick announcement about the survey, and it would be nice to know by Wednesday at 9 a.m. what's the timeline for the postcards going out, just to promote among the Celebrators, maybe 100 people in the audience, fill out the survey. If you get a card, do that one. If you, and everyone's going to get one, so you may do it twice. So to do that. And second, and then she asked me, would I be willing to talk about volunteer opportunities in Celebration? So I just asked Susan for about 20 copies of the volunteer form in hopes that some might fill them out. Maybe I'll return 20, but anyway, and then again, they highlight the 6 committees. So I'll just do a brief pitch, and if Brian or Vaughn are there, are you a member yet? You were going to.
I just turned 50, so.
She's a kid.
We'll leave that out of the tape.
I'm good.
So anyway, just an FYI.
Okay. Just for the sake of the audience, in something I sent out Saturday to the board, I said on the website, the technology committee is going to look at it and stuff like that, but clearly it's been going on. So I've asked that at workshops and board meetings, we get an update from management, specifically like a 1-page or 1.5-pager, what's going on with the website update.
Thank you.
I'm specifically looking for, I don't care what structure it is. Give us bullets, give us something, but, it was,
And
what the heck is going on? We
And
need,
within whatever that contract said. So the technology committee may go beyond the contract. Look,
I don't care who looks at it, but at the end of the day, it was
Let's get it
due
done.
here, it was supposed to cost this, today it's costing this, and where the heck are we? And we need to regularly touch on this until it just
Let's
gets
get it
painful.
done.
We got the original proposal a year ago today. And it's-
Okay, any last item for this board meeting?
we're meeting on Friday.
Friday, we got to walk around.
Drive around?
Yeah.
Walk around.
And for the drive around, we wanted to look at the
I
athletic
do have a quick
fields.
question. Are we going to make the athletic fields part of that drive around?
Absolutely.
You asked
Yes.
for that.
And can the Recreation Committee be informed of the approximate time that we're going to be there? I had made a request to the committee members that they might want to join us for that part of the walk around. They've been out to see the site, but I think there are some interesting things that can be shared in terms of information when we're on the site with those members.
Yeah, 'cause I had sent an email, I thought we ought to look at where the fence is gonna be, how parking's gonna work. I mean, I think that's kind of important. And then I'd also asked that we looked at Hippodrome in concert
Is that
with
1 o'clock?
it starts at 1, and we meet here?
I believe so, yes. And I have a meeting this afternoon with the gentleman that was asking about croquet to talk to him about some of the other facilities that are available, so we can follow through when we drive around on Friday.
Meet here at 1?
Yep.
Party bus.
We're leaving.
Party bus.
We'll be taking on.
All right, we're 1 minute ahead.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So let's take a 5-minute break, because I need one, and then we'll do the CCS meeting.
5 minutes.
I am freezing.
It is
I'm
cold in here.
shivering
It
over
is
here.
cold.
My good God.
Yeah, did you want to come?
We got the heater under here.
Oh.